Now, the 3 Martini Lunch with Greg Corombos and Jim Geraghty.
And welcome, everyone, to the Tuesday edition of the 3 Martini Lunch, along with Jim Geraghty of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. We have good, bad, and crazy martinis for conservatives today. All of it brought to you by ZipRecruiter. Right now, 3 Martini Lunch listeners can try ZipRecruiter for free at this exclusive web address, ZipRecruiter.com/martini. Much more on that a little bit later in the podcast. And Jim, the good martini today is not just good for conservatives. It's good for people who are generally fans of the truth. It'll come as a huge shock to many people I know that the client of Michael Avenatti is drastically changing her story from her sworn statement as opposed to the interview she just gave to Kate Snow of NBC. So a bunch of clips here from NBC. You know it's going to be a really consistent, detailed story when Kate Snow has to preface the whole thing with this.
We've been trying independently to reach out to anyone who remembers attending parties with Julie Swetnick and Brett Kavanaugh, and we've been asking her attorney for names. So far, we've not found anyone who remembers that. She's also unclear about when she first decided to come forward.
And so that goes into her timeline, which is a total mess. Here's the first thing she said about when she first decided to maybe get involved with all this.
I wouldn't be here today except for about 6 weeks ago. I happened to learn about Brett Kavanaugh becoming one of the people who was shortlisted to go to the Supreme Court.
This is in July? Summer?
I don't remember exactly, but it was about 6 weeks ago.
I don't remember exactly, but it was 6 weeks ago. Brett Kavanaugh was publicly shortlisted, Jim, but 6 weeks ago is about August 20th, 21st, which is well over a month after he was the nominee. He wasn't on the shortlist anymore. He was the nominee, so Kate Snow follows up on that, and we get this nonsense.
So you only thought about coming forward when you learned about Dr. Ford?
Yes, because I did not know how close Brett Kavanaugh was to possibly becoming the next Supreme Court justice.
I just want to get the timeline right about this because he was nominated in July. Christine Ford, Dr. Christine Blasey Ford came forward in the Washington Post more recently in September. So was it in September that you
It's been several weeks, but I'm not somebody who follows the news. I'm not political at all.
Sure. Let's go to the final one now. Remember, one of the major allegations here is that Brett Kavanaugh and Mark Judge, they spiked the punch. They got girls drugged so they couldn't say no, and then they were gang raped. That got walked back pretty good here.
In that statement, Swetnick said she became aware of efforts by Kavanaugh and his friend Mark Judge to spike punch at parties. In our interview, she said she saw them near the punch, but did not specifically say she saw either man spike it. Did you see Brett Kavanaugh, spiking the punch, putting green alcohol in the punch?
I saw him giving red Solo cups to quite a few girls during that time frame, and there was green punch at those parties. And I would not take one of those glasses from Brett Kavanaugh, excuse me. I saw him around the punch, I won't say bowls, or the punch containers. I don't know what he did, but I saw him buy them, yes.
I don't know what he did, but he was by them. Jim, I know, like I said at the beginning, shocking that an Avenatti client doesn't have a consistent story here. We also have no witnesses who can corroborate anything. One of them that she named says they've never heard of Julie Swetnick. So what's the takeaway here?
You know, Greg, to go from he spiked the punch with Quaaludes to he was giving out red Solo cups is the biggest climb down since Hillary descended Everest. Oh, you saw him handing out red Solo cups. How many people at every backyard barbecue since the formation of the Solo Corporation in the 1970s could match that description? Another thing, which I think is a good point, both not only for legal testimony, but I think probably even for accounts that you quote in journalism, Greg. If someone says, I don't know, but ignore everything after the but.
Right.
The other thing which is worth noting is when Avenatti unleashed this, and I point out in today's Morning Jolt, he unleashed this through Twitter. He did not go straight to MSNBC. He did not go straight to CNN. He did not go straight to the New York Times, Washington Post. He didn't call up Ronan Farrow, not even Jane Meyer, right? I mean, he just put this out there. And the whole thing is that this is a sworn statement. This isn't just some willy-nilly, she's saying this kind of stuff. This is a sworn statement. Look at the spacing on this, right? This looks like testimony. This is really important. Now, people point out this isn't submitted to a court anywhere, right? So she's really not. People say, if she lies on this, she's committing perjury. Things don't become more credible because you put them on 11-inch by 18-inch paper instead of by 8.5 by 11-inch, right? It doesn't become a bigger deal because of the formatting. But then here we are, less than a couple of days later, and she's contradicting the sworn statement. Not just, as you pointed out, in the drugging thing. I ran the numbers on this. Look, we don't know she has not specified when in the year these parties began and when in the year these parties ended, other than saying they were during the school year. She says this occurred from 1980 to 1982. In 1980, Greg, Brett Kavanaugh was 15 going on 16. Now, I was pretty lazy as a 15-year-old. If you're organizing weekly gang rape parties that are somehow bringing in college students and smuggling Quaaludes at age 15, that's pretty mind-boggling. Also, she said in her testimony she stopped attending after a assault upon her when she was 19 years old. You do the math on that. That comes out to, I believe, 1981. We don't. Again, I know her birth date is 1963. I don't, as far as I've seen, Greg, I have not come across her birth date and what time of year. But if she stopped attending when she was 19, she would have stopped attending the parties in 1982. In her sworn statement, she said she went to more than 10 house parties in the Washington, D.C. area during the years 1981 to 1983, where Mark Judge and Brett Kavanaugh were present. If you had suffered a terrible sexual assault at one of these parties, why would you keep going to them? Depending on when this timeline is, she kept attending them for a whole year afterwards. Again, many reasons to be skeptical of this. I suppose we could be very mad at MSNBC for putting her up on camera without being able to verify really any of her claims. I guess you could also say, though, that by putting her out there, many people are looking at her testimony with great skepticism, noting the contradictions and just observing that many things about her description, from the timeline to even not just the timeline of back in the early 80s, the timeline of when she became aware of this, when she became aware of Kavanaugh, and when she decided to come forward, are simply not making any sense here. So I suppose you could say kind of a backhanded kudos to MSNBC. I don't know, though, if this is necessarily a good journalistic model that we wish to emulate in the future to, hey, somebody said something, we weren't able to verify it, but here's the accusation anyway.
Yes. The standards for going on the air or into print with these accusations with nothing to verify it is definitely troubling these days. Jim, I want to go back to the timeline just briefly, and I obviously don't want to indulge anyone's conspiracy theories, but 6 weeks ago, as I mentioned, is right around August 20th. By that time, Kavanaugh was obviously the nominee, had been made the nominee on July 9th, and there wasn't much really being discussed about the Kavanaugh nomination in August. So the fact that she would have heard about it then seems odd, except when you think about what we learned last week. What was going on in August? That's when we had the polygraph. That's when Ford lawyered up. It just makes you wonder.
It does, Greg.
All right. Well,
it just makes you wonder. That's all I can say.
Good restraint on your part. But if you're looking, maybe for a good lawyer, so that means Michael Avenatti's not in the loop, you need to hire someone. Maybe you're a law firm looking to get rid of Michael Avenatti or someone like him and hire someone who's, actually good at the law. But you know what's not smart? Job sites that overwhelm you with tons of the wrong resumes. But you know what is smart? ZipRecruiter.com/Martini. Unlike other job sites, ZipRecruiter doesn't wait for candidates to find you. ZipRecruiter finds them for you.
Its powerful matching technology scans thousands of resumes, identifies people with the right skills, education, and experience for your job, and actively invites them to apply, so you get qualified candidates fast. No more sorting through the wrong resumes, no more waiting for the right candidates to apply. It's no wonder that ZipRecruiter is rated #1 by employers in the United States, and this rating comes from hiring sites on Trustpilot with more than 1,000 reviews.
And right now, our listeners can try ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free at this exclusive web address, ZipRecruiter.com/Martini. That's ZipRecruiter.com/MARTINI. ZipRecruiter.com/Martini. Do it. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. All right, Jim, let's move on to our bad martini now. And as all of us have been consumed by the Kavanaugh issue over the past number of weeks here, oh, yeah, we got an election, midterms, a lot of important races, Senate, every House seat, a lot of governorships. What we've been saying for a long time now is that keeping the House is probably going to be the toughest objective for Republicans to meet. And unfortunately, it's getting tougher and tougher. First of all, the Daily Caller reports this. The National Republican Congressional Committee has reportedly decided to cut at least $1 million in advertising that was going toward helping Representative Kevin Yoder of Kansas as the GOP reevaluates certain candidates' chances of winning heading into November. That's translated as we're giving up on you. Yoder, who has served in Kansas' 3rd congressional district since 2011, was endorsed by President Donald Trump and faces Sharice Davids in November's election. Hot Air also reports, and others have as well, the NRCC is now pulling back advertising also for incumbent Representatives Keith Rothfuss in Pennsylvania, Mike Kaufman of Colorado, and Mike Bishop in Michigan. So, Jim, obviously, both parties do this. It's basically triage. You got to spend the resources on the ones where you think you're going to get the best return for that investment. The Republicans can afford to lose 20-some seats. A lot of estimates suggesting they're going to lose more than that. But we're over a month away from Election Day, and already these guys are getting cut loose.
Yeah, and for everyone who wants to say, the polls are wrong, this is media spin. Look, it's the job of this Republican committee to get Republicans elected. They have every incentive in the world to give these candidates the incumbents the benefit of the doubt, to see the glass as half full, to keep hope alive, et cetera, et cetera. Now, does this mean that they're done? No, it points out that the committee no longer sees them as the best place to spend their money. And this is the sort of thing where you can just kind of feel momentum shifting. Now, look, I know people are saying that the Kavanaugh fight is energizing conservatives. I do get all these anecdotes of people saying that they're mad as heck about this and they're fired up, and maybe they weren't so fired up about the midterms, but now they are because they're just so mad about what Democrats. Look, this could happen. This could shake out. I'm a little skeptical of the red wave theory being floated around by the president and some of his fans. But yeah, you know what? I think it's safe to say that we've got less Republican lethargy than we might have had a couple of weeks ago or a couple of months ago. That having been said, it's still a tough midterm environment. This traditionally is when the president's party loses votes. This is a situation where we know the Democrats are fired up as all hell. They're going to march across broken glass if they have to go vote. These are House candidates who cannot take it for granted. They're going to get outspent. They're going to be hard fought on the airwaves. One of the things that you jokingly alluded to how little we've been talking about the midterms, Greg, between what the president does on a daily basis and now this midterm fight. Unless you're one of the senators on the Senate Judiciary Committee, people just aren't seeing you on the news. And I assume that's probably a frustrating environment if you're an incumbent where you want to say, hey, look at the good news about the tax cuts. Hey, look at the economy. Look how well things are going. You don't get any of that through because of the just sheer dominance of other political news. So we will see what happens. The House is adjourned. The House members are out there campaigning on the campaign trail. We'll see how things shake out, but I think it's still reason for Republicans to be worried about the outlook for the midterm elections.
Let's move on to our crazy martini now, Jim, and back to the Kavanaugh situation. And it's been very interesting ever since Jeff Flake's interview on 60 Minutes, how the goalposts have moved. And Mitch McConnell even said this yesterday. If you listen carefully, you can hear the goalposts moving. Part of it is about the length of the investigation, and then even more of it is about what matters. And so in addition to the Ford allegations, which, as we explained yesterday, a lot of inconsistencies in her testimony and what was originally reported in the Washington Post. And now we've got breathless reporting on Brett Kavanaugh's college days. And one of the ones that got a lot of attention yesterday was that in 1985, while an undergrad at Yale, Brett Kavanaugh got into an argument at a bar in Connecticut and dumped ice on someone 33 years ago. And so John Berman at CNN interviewing Mazie Hirono, the senator from Hawaii, trying to figure out if this ice incident from 1985 is disqualifying.
I want to ask you about these new developments that we found out overnight. These police documents that show that Brett Kavanaugh threw ice in someone's face during a bar fight when he was in college. Do you feel that that is in any way disqualifying for someone to sit in the Supreme Court?
This is why we need an FBI investigation, because there are a lot of allegations, and the reports really are about how he behaves when he is drunk. So that is very relevant. And the portrayal of himself as practically a choir boy is very much contradicted by his roommate, for example, in college, as well as people who knew him in high school. Why we need an FBI investigation, why we've been calling for one for what seems like months.
Months? Was it 2 weeks? 2 weeks, I think. Mazie Hirono and Julie Swetnick need to take a class on calendars or something here. But Jim, what do you make of Mazie's latest hit here?
Yeah, I mean, look, what we get at here, well, there are a lot of allegations out there. Greg, all of us can make allegations about Senator Hirono if we want. And not every allegation warrants an FBI investigation. I think it's worth saying that a lot of people left, right, and center would say, all right, you want to investigate this allegation by Ford, fine. There are no corroborating witnesses, but if you want to get the FBI to go and interview these people and say, hey, are you sure you don't remember any party like this? Kavanaugh said he believes any investigation will exonerate him, and that he welcomes any investigation. Fine, let's go ahead and do this. But we can't reach the point where any allegation from anybody automatically has to warrant an FBI investigation. And then there's the idea that, well, he was interviewed after a bar fight back in the early 80s because he may have thrown ice. I do believe that there may be a long and ugly history of Brett Kavanaugh participating in snowball fights going back to the 70s, Greg. Some of those snowballs may have had ice in them. When they say, this really goes back to how he behaves when he's drunk. Greg, wasn't this about sexual assault like 2 or 3 days ago? Mm-hmm. And now all of a sudden it's like, well, look, there's no evidence of that, but he may be drinking, I really do want to, and I'd be curious. I don't know how much this is what's fueling this anecdotal description of Republican anger. I do wonder, though, how many people are watching this and thinking back, people who are beyond their teen years or early 20s, thinking back to their hopefully good old days. But remember the number of times that they've done something stupid, and alcohol was involved. If you want to get some descriptions of my dumb things by heavy lifting, I talked about a time where I was, if not an alcoholic, drinking too much, alcohol was becoming too much of how I had fun. Never went to treatment, went 6 months, realized I did not have a problem. I simply just had begun to rely on it as a crutch for fun and got through that. Nothing akin to this, no bar fights. But lots of people can look back on this time in their lives and say, God, what was I thinking? Boy, was I stupid. No levels of sexual assault, but things that are embarrassing, things that are not in keeping with the kind of person they like to think of themselves of today. Men, women, white, black, Latino, Asian, all across the spectrum, right? There kind of was this cultural agreement that things that you do when you're young and stupid are forgivable because you're young and stupid, and that the grown-up adult you, I don't know exactly what age we should consider the cutoff point, Greg. I'm sure that Beto O'Rourke would say 27, considering his DUI at 26 and attempting to leave the scene of an accident. Oh, wait, Greg, he says he has this witness who says he totally didn't. He's just not willing to come forward with this witness. I'm just going to point out, Greg, between Beto O'Rourke's passenger in the car, Keith Ellison's accuser saying that there was video but that she's not going to release it, and the therapist notes of Ford. It's an amazing couple of days for substantial and credible proof that people just don't feel like bringing forward. Boy, it's kind of interesting how often that happens. Anyway, closing thought for today. In the court of law, we have very high standards for evidence and for eyewitness testimony, right? You put them under oath. You swear under oath to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. You can get cross-examined. You can get scrutinized. People can ask, do you remember this part but not that part? How reliable is your memory? Is it possible you're mixing up figure A with figure B? That kind of stuff. In the court of public opinion, we don't have any of this. That's where we have our problem. In that everything that's been brought forth against Kavanaugh would nowhere near enough to get a conviction. But boy, oh boy, juries are required to pay attention for the entirety of the trial. The general public is not.
Yeah, the Democrats are willing to make this about just how truthful he was about how drunk he got. Ever since Jeff Flake said on 60 Minutes that there was any perjury proven from his testimony, he'd be a no vote. It's been amazing how radically we've seen the shift in the coverage of this.
You could just see and feel the goalpost shifting as soon as Flake said that. So thanks a lot, Senator. Good job. Heck of a job. Heck of a job, Arizona. Heck of a job.
It's only Tuesday. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Geraghty of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. And be sure to visit our friends over at ZipRecruiter. Right now, 3 Martini Lunch listeners can try ZipRecruiter for free at this exclusive web address, ZipRecruiter.com/Martini. And tune in again Wednesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.